Hi, I'm Roy. This is Yard of Random Books intro slide, and it's also the end of Garbaugust, so it's a readathon I participated in, which was a month of reading trashy books, which was immense fun. And just looking back, I started off, I think week one was about sex and violence, so I went with a Ken Bulmer Fox novel, which promised violence and delivered. Yes, obviously, it's a war at sea. There's people are being blown apart with cannons and all sorts of things, and cool to start that series at last that I've always wanted to read. I think week two was Vintage Week. I looked at WHAM versus Witch, two exploitation novels about feminism, and I'll put the links in the video in the description below if you want to delve back into these earlier videos. Week three was Anything Goes. I looked at Spectros, a master magician, wizards battling each other in the Old West, and one of them can transform into a gunfighter. Fantastic. Also, my first venture into genre romance, in fact, a Euromance with Diamond Heart by Suzanne McCarthy and actual Mills and Boon. There'll be more of this coming because September there's a reading event, Autumn Amour, that is all about romance. So that was interesting. And also the horror that is Mash Goes to London, which I didn't finish. Coming up to the last week, where it's about trash books that made you question everything. I think that's the wording of the prompt. I thought back to this, the ESP Worm by Robert Margroff and Piers Antony, because I read this when I was very young and impressionable. So you could say it was giving me new perspectives. This book, American paperback, who's it by? Paperback Library Original. This showed up in a newsagent shop where we lived. So a newsagent, kind of like a newsstand, small local shops that sell newspapers, confectionery, tobacco, used to have books. In fact, they were quite an important distribution route for paperback novels. So, and they'd also have remaindered books as well. So weird stuff like a random American science fiction book. I was fascinated as like an 11-year-old by this book because the cover had this sort of trippy, surreal artwork, and the the blurb was promising a brain-bending science fiction surprise! Exclamation mark. It was also, it had cosmic characters, great atom graphic as well, and it basically looked kind of weird and fun. And I had read science fiction stuff that was around at home, so I'd read Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, probably some John Wyndham. All great, but none of those could be called a romp, whereas this is one of the wildest, wickedest romps in the annals of science fiction. It also features, promises the blurb, the most sensual woman on earth in a star-crossed triangle. So, as I recall, this made me quite... would I be able to buy the book? So, the racks in newsagent shops, the stuff at the bottom was obviously for kids, things like comics. There was stuff at the very top that was obviously not for kids, like nudie books. And then the middle was a bit of a grey area. And I had been shouted at for reaching for something in that grey area. I think it was Mad Magazine. You think it'd be okay, but I did wonder, would either parents or the newsagent people be like policing my purchase? But somehow I got hold of it. Maybe I got my mum to buy it. I don't know. Obviously, the newsagents don't like sit up at night reading the books and deciding who could have them. So yeah, the ESP Worm, which I remembered really enjoying. Reading it now, it's utterly atrocious. It's probably the worst book I've read for a long time, or reread. It's so basically, it's in the future. There's a world government. The leading the party that's in power are called the New Victorians. So it's like super puritanical. People wear complete coverings so their bodies aren't on show at all. I think women wear sort of inflated suits so that no bodily features can be discerned. So there's some incredibly cringy, clunky social satire with this continuous, laborious stuff about sort of nudge stuff about basically sex. It's kind of a sex comedy in space. Now I just can't see why. I think maybe I was so young I just filtered all of that out and I just enjoyed the science fiction trappings of space journeys and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's terrible, and I know Piers Antony is one of the authors. Obviously, went on to write like 30,000 novels, and I've noticed his name mentioned in lots of other Garbaugust reads, usually not very favourably. So it's sort of in a weird category of I used to love it and now I don't. There's lots of stuff I did love then that I still love. This isn't it, though I still do quite like the cover. So the ESP Worm, published in 1971, made me also think about another book that I read a few years before that, probably in about 1966. So that was the novelisation of Forbidden Planet, the movie. And that was actually the first adult novel I ever read, first adult book I ever read. So in a way, that book was my introduction to the world of grown-up reading, and it has set the template for what I enjoy reading evermore. So I was lured in by the cover, the robot looking out at a desolate landscape, and the blurb on the back was pretty exciting, talking about this going to Altair 4 and the kind of rescue mission. It would have been irrelevant to me that it was a novelisation. It's very clear on the cover that it's an adaptation of a movie, but you couldn't decide to just watch a movie. If it wasn't on at the pictures or on the television, that was it. So it was just out there in the void. So I won't spoilerize it because it is a good story. The film's a lot easier to find than the book. Um, Still has some interesting things about it. Has some terrible things about it too, particularly the sexism edging into misogyny. But there's also some cool things about it, particularly the main idea of where the main sort of monsters come from. So, as a novelisation, qualifies as trash in lots of definitions. Certainly lowbrow rather than middlebrow or highbrow fiction. Um, it's full of sensation, lots of great science fiction ideas, hyper intelligent ancient races, stuff like that. Um, it, it also has a comedy robot, which is okay. A robot who appears in lots of other things. And I actually did see that robot, or his, the prop, at some kind of exhibition later on when I was a child. So it's sort of the one thing about trash spills over into real life. Um, it's also, and obviously it's genre fiction, it's sensational. The stuff on the back, which I would have pored over every detail of this book, and I was really proud of myself for finishing it and reading a grown-up book, entering the world of literature via the Forbidden Planet. There's an advert for Corgi Books, talks about westerns, mysteries, um, low cost affordable fiction. So I thought, right, I mean, probably internalized all of that, and that's what I've been reading ever since. Um, So also always hoping for a dog to bring me a book in its jaws, like the corgi logo of that time. There's some great science fiction, like sense of wonder stuff in it, which actually for me in the book was like even more spectacular than it was in the film. So there's things like it's revealed that the planet has all this technology inside it, and you suddenly see this sort of tunnel of glowing technology stuff disappearing to a really far away vanishing point deep inside the planet. That's great. There are invisible monsters that tear people apart. There's a moment when you can like see them or half see them as they're electrified in a force field. Again, in imagination, better than the movie. Although movie won an Oscar, I think, for special effects. So of the time, that was great as well. So all of that, it was getting me onto the train of sensational fiction. I still like adaptations. It's a novelization, so it's not a sort of piece of work in its own right. So I think that's what gives it the trash dimension. Is it's kind of exploiting something else. In this case, the movie, which doesn't mean it's a bad book. In fact, I think it's quite a good book. And it's smuggling in some highbrow stuff because the story of Forbidden Planet is The Tempest by William Shakespeare. And this isn't some insight of mine, it's widely written about. There's whole articles about how that works. But basically, in The Tempest, people marooned on an island. There's a magician with a daughter. Same things happen, except it's a planet rather than an island. Dr. Morbius instead of Prospero, etc. So high culture was smuggled in to my brain via the medium of a trashy novel. So I guess my final thoughts on Garbaugust is, yeah, there's some stuff that's just unreadable, some stuff that probably is so cynically produced to try to monetize a trend that it has like historical interest maybe, but is pretty terrible as well. And then there's stuff that's great, and what you get out of it depends like where you're at, what you want at the time. So for sort of 6-year-old me wanting to read a grown-up book, lured into the world of science fiction, of ideas, and and as it turns out, of Shakespeare and literature, Forbidden Planet did the job. So yes, go trash. That's the end of my Garbaugust reporting for this year. Goodbye.